List, I saw people from Mississauga, Whitby, Burlington, St. Catharines, Orillia, Barrie, Oshawa, Richmond Hill, Brampton, Hamilton, Cobourg, Guelph, and Pickering. And I was looking at it, I was thinking, this is a real testament to the role that CUI is playing in this area. The Civic Action Alliance, what are they called now? The Civic Action, that's right, they were the City Summit Alliance, has been talking about the need to think and act like a region. And looking at that list, I thought CUI has for some time now been a vehicle for that, without much trumpeting that part of their role. This session is also a testament to the relevance and timeliness of the subject, downtowns. I'm sure everyone in this room has a list of downtowns that has special meaning in their lives, and you're going to hear from city planners for most of this morning. So I thought I would give you the storyteller's version of what downtowns mean. Really to give you a chance to think about the downtowns that have the same kind of meaning in your lives, because I'm sure every one of you here has that list of downtowns, the places that made you feel you were out and about and part of a bigger story. My very first downtown was Main Street, Grunthal, Manitoba. Population then not yet 1,000. The post office was there. The coffee shop was right beside the post office, so that's where the farmers would catch up with each other before they headed back to the farm for the day. My church, Elam Mennonite, was on Main Street. So was the bakery, with this smell of fresh baked bread and the rustling sound of paper bags that I expect we're coming back to as well. Coming back to a lot of those things, isn't that interesting? And that's a radio detail, I have to tell you. The sound of those paper bags, I can hear it when I say that. Ginter's grocery store was there. On one side was the produce. On the other one was hunting rifles and china trays and silver, stack trays that you bought for someone's 25th wedding anniversary. They almost all said 25th on them. Much smaller section for the 50th anniversary ones. Chernoby's Farm Implements, also on Main Street once a year. They hosted the town pancake breakfast. The school, grades 1 to 3, also on Main Street. The town's first drive-in, where occasionally my older sisters would take me and I would watch the teenagers in awe, some of whom smoked. And of course, the competing grocery store was also on Main Street. That was Bryski's, where the school kids would buy their jawbreakers and candy cigarettes. And when the town held its annual parade, that happened on Main Street. When the Queen drove through town, and the horse club spent as much time as the what did we call it? They weren't BIAs in small towns. They were civic commerce. They were something commerce in the name. Chamber of Commerce, thank you. We dressed up the town and brushed our horses in preparation for the Queen's ride down Main Street. So that was my first downtown. My next downtown, Portage Avenue in Winnipeg. So that was my first big downtown. And I remember the Christmas shopping windows at the Hudson's Bay store on Portage, the Paddle Wheel restaurant inside, which has recently, I read, been renovated. All these little signs of green shoots in downtowns. I remember rain slapping on the windshields as we waited at red lights, right? Those were my traffic jams in Winnipeg. I remember the new leather boots that my mother bought me in downtown Winnipeg, and the smell of the leather filling the car as we drove back home. By the time I was a teenager, we actually didn't drive downtown as much. We went to the mall on the outskirts of Winnipeg. I can't remember the name of the mall. And I have few sharp memories of the mall. A parking lot, very much like every other parking lot of a mall that I've known. So after high school, I actually moved into downtown Winnipeg and took a job at Gilman's wholesale jewelry distributors. And I remember the downtown core in those days often seemed to empty out on weekends. It was somewhat forlorn. But, I loved it still. I loved the old buildings on Portage, where I was often sent on my little errands to deliver, actually, rubies emeralds and diamonds, little tiny packages, to the jewelry setters who were inside those buildings. I remember the Royal Winnipeg Ballet rehearsed on one of the floors, and I longed to be part of that. The sunlight would pour into the windows. I'd hear the music and the dancers. I longed, knowing I would never be there. So that was my second downtown. My third downtown, I would say, was Yonge Street here. I'd moved to Toronto to study journalism at Ryerson. And in those days, Yonge Street was very gritty and grimy. There were lots of panhandlers at the subway station at Gerrard and Yonge. Not Gerrard, Dundas and Yonge, where I'd arrive for school every day. More dollar stores than you could count. There was always a new one. Strip clubs, I'd say venerable strip clubs, if a strip club could be said to be venerable. The Zanzibar, where I did one of my first interviews as a student journalist with a stripper in the dressing room. She was stitching embroidery stitching beads onto her bra. It's the first place where I saw men stick bills into the bra or into the, I guess you don't call it a bra, whatever you call it when it's public. That bra of a stripper. There was the Eaton Centre, the closest thing I think Toronto has to a community hall. I remember watching a robbery take place before my very eyes on Yonge Street. This amazingly gorgeous man, a black man dressed in pure white, doing this beautifully choreographed move, sprint down the street, and with one gesture grabbing these bundles of cash out of a woman's hand just as she was going to drop it into the safety deposit box of one of the banks. I've covered several shootings on Yonge Street by now. The father passing by this Brass Rail restaurant, the shooting at the Eaton Centre where Jane Kriebel was shot, and of course recently the one where the young man was killed. I remember the sidewalks crowded at night. Sam the Record Man, where, jazz nerd that I was, I would pore over the Ella Fitzgerald CDs. And I learned to love Yonge Street the way you love a scruffy friend. I would have liked to be better friends with Yorkville, but Yorkville wasn't really having much to do with me. It was Yonge Street that hung out with me and had my name on it, for better or for worse. And I suddenly realized, as I was talking to the panelists preparing for this session last week, that I have another downtown, which is Roncesvalles. I live about 4 doors from Roncesvalles on the west side. Used to live on the east side. That counts. The same way Yonge is a dividing line for Toronto. Roncesvalles is a dividing, border. And people will say, "Oh, you've gone over to the west side. Will you still talk to us?" The houses are bigger on the west side. Roncesvalles is where I buy my bread today, also in paper bags, where I drop off my library books. When my barbecue died last week, hours before guests were ready to come for my first barbecue, I hustled over to Home Hardware a couple of blocks away to buy, a green egg. Oh, my God, what do you do with these barbecues? Joe's Convenience, never run by anyone called Joe in all the years that I've lived there, is open till 11 a.m., so I can grab my milk and my eggs and my, occasionally a box of Special K with a film of dust on top. The grocery store beside it, don't even know its name, although it's been there forever, and the people who work there know my sons and always tell me what good boys they are now that they're all grown up, and I ask about their sons. So I've been a witness to the renaissance of that corner of that downtown too. We've turned a corner on Roncesvalles, and across the city we're turning this kind of corner that's taking us back downtown. We're no longer rushing to malls in the suburbs. We're increasingly inclined to walk instead of drive. Walking has become the big convenience, and driving the inconvenience. On Roncesvalles, as a community, we got together to advocate better planting conditions for our trees, formed a group called Roncesvalles Renewed, which is meeting for a potluck next week to celebrate our relationships and our little corner of the city. Some of my Roncesvalles neighbors are here today. I saw Dave Olson just arrived. John Bowker is here, the diplomat from the Roncesvalles Village BIA. And I was over the moon the day that I saw those first new trees planted after the construction was finished. And the day those the tree guards went in, well, the day the streetcars came back was pretty wonderful too, but when those tree guards went in around the trees paid for by the BIA, I was as thrilled as the day I got those new leather boots in Winnipeg as a child. So those are a few of my downtowns, and I know every single person in this room can trace similar patterns in their own life and their own emotional response to these places, because downtown makes us feel that's where it's at, to put it in technical city planning terms. Downtown, wherever it is in your heart and mind and location, is the place where your own little individual river merges with a bigger, or your individual stream merges with a bigger river, where you have to step lively, get jostled, wait in line, look about you, wait for the light to change, look both ways before you cross the street. That's downtown. You know a real downtown when you see it. It can't be replaced by a suburban mall. You can't invent it in a sense. I think it's because we're human and we build cities in our likeness. The heart of the human body is located in our chest. It's not an appendage. It's not a limb. It is central. And so are downtowns at the center of a community. It's organic. I don't think a downtown can help, in a sense, but become what it is. It can suffer, it can be damaged, it can slow, the heartbeat can slow, it can shrivel, but in spite of all of that, it's still the downtown. Reno Mastacci, am I pronouncing it? Yes. Chief planner for the town of Markham, talked last week as we were preparing for the panel about building Markham City Centre. And it's a very new downtown where Reno feels as though he's working with very raw material. But I wonder if it isn't a little bit like a sculptor working with a hunk of stone or a block of wood and carving out what that, they'll say that they're carving out what it wants to become. It's not, you're not imposing a downtown on a place. I think it's that organic. They are organic to the place where they help define. So this event by CUI about the importance of downtowns is more evidence, I think, that a renaissance of downtowns is underway. The small but mighty staff of CUI, together with the help of many student interns, has produced this landmark study. They say what you don't measure. I think you city planners came up with this. Maybe I don't know who said it first, but we'll say city planners said what you don't measure doesn't get counted. And so this kind of document, I think, is going to become a basic tool so that the next time around, the revitalization of downtowns won't be as accidental and that the health will be monitored better. It's like we do a better job of healthcare these days. We'll do a better job of downtowns. There's also an amazing panel assembled for this morning. Councillor Kristen Wong-Tam, is she here yet? No? Glenn, have you seen Kristen yet? Okay. Pauline Larson, Research and Strategy Consultant with the Downtown Young BIA. Robert Friedman, Director of Urban Design at the City of Toronto. Reno Mastacci, Director of Planning and Urban Design for the town of Markham. So welcome to everyone who's come here this morning. Everyone in this room is engaged in helping to speed along the great renewal of downtowns. I'd like to turn this over now to Katherine Morton, Senior Planner at CUI. She's responsible for economics and research, and she'll tell you about this study that started to collect this vital data on a national scale.
Well, good morning again. So Katherine and I are going to do a bit of a tag team. Mary, you really captured the essence of so many of the things that we found in our study, the passion, the personal touches, and the way people feel about downtowns. I think the title of this study says a lot. In fact, it says it all. The value of downtowns, it's about the word value, the value economically, practically, symbolically, and personally. And so what we've done with this study, it's a chance to identify best practices that can inform other practitioners across the country and inspire them, and also let them know where some mistakes have been made so they can learn from that. And it's to create a knowledge base to build on and to acknowledge the incredible good work that's being done across the country. This is the first study of its kind. And I think that this is just tell you a little bit how it came about. We were talking to the Canadian members of the International Downtown Association, and they enjoyed being a member of that global organization based in Washington, but they were thirsty for Canadian content. So we talked to them about how to make this happen. And so after it took about 2 years to get to the point where we could have the first 10 cities come together to participate in this, and it's been truly a collaborative effort. So Mary's already touched on a number of things about what makes a downtown great, and it's hard to top that. But I think the common denominator from Victoria to Halifax, as Mary said, is people are passionate about their downtowns. And it's not just the leaders in the business community or the politicians or the city staff. It's the people. After our study was released in Ottawa a few weeks ago, Katherine and I have been on a number of radio shows, and some of them have been call-in shows. And the level of interest from members of the public, they really feel the downtown personally, and they had their opinions and they were asking questions, and it was a really interesting to hear that. Oh, wrong one. So, just going to tell you a little bit about the 5 principles and why we decided to develop these principles and to determine what makes a downtown. I think the primary reason is because we're comparing downtowns as diverse as Fredericton and Toronto. So how can you base that purely on numbers? So we thought that we should take a principled approach to assess and compare, because each downtown is so different. And how we did that is we did a literature review. Many of the interns that are in the room participated in that. And there's a lot of really good work being written about downtown. So we drew a lot from that. We polled our board. Many of our board are urbanists, and we valued their input, and we polled our networks, and then we tested the results to see how it developed. And so we came up with these 5 points. Visibility. What is the role of the downtown plays in the wider city? Visionary. And what we learned, Katherine talked more about this in a minute, is you need a multiplicity of leadership to be able to take a vision forward through to implementation. You've got to be able to survive political cycles. And you can have a strong leader for 3-4 decades or even or political periods, but if the other support isn't there, then you lose momentum. Livability. Well, what is the sign of livability? Well, you're looking for vibrancy, livability, and connectedness. And housing is a key indicator. Toronto is a good example of that. If you look at the impact of the city deregulating what we call the kings either side of downtown, and the number of residences that have come into those downtowns, into those areas, and the young people who have been drawn to work there and be able to live and work and enjoy that experience. And also, strategy is important. Is the strategy wise, thoughtful, and looking at strategically into the future? And there are different ways to be strategic. It's definitely not something you want to be prescriptive about. So this is one of my favorite graphics in the study. What we've done, and this was inspired by the famous poster that Neptis developed, where it looked at metropolitan areas around the world. So these are all to the same scale, and you see the size of the city grid, and although you may not be able to read the details on the screen, you can actually download our study from our website and explore some of these metrics that we've developed. And what this does is it actually gives you a chance to look at the different characteristics that make the downtown work. So how do we define the downtown? this is a key thing. So we started with the official version. What does the local municipality say? We were looking at the natural and physical boundaries like railway lines or rivers, and we also suggested that the downtowns are where you find key functions, key civic functions like City Hall, the main shopping street. Vancouver's an exception. City Hall in Vancouver isn't in downtown, but that's okay. In the end, it has to make sense. We want people to be able to look at these downtowns that we've identified and say, yep, that's downtown. And if you look at Toronto, it's so big it didn't fit on the previous slide. Clearly, it's greatly larger than all of the other downtowns, and for historical reasons, because there's so much going on in the downtown. And you'll see the railway lines sticking out to the west there. And we included that because when you talk to people living in the condos in the railway lands, you ask them where they live. They say, well, I live downtown. So it has to make sense. What is your sense of downtown? So I'm going to turn it over to Katherine now, and I'll probably interject from time to time. But Katherine's going to talk to you about the rest of the study.
Okay, great. Thanks, Glenn, and thanks to everyone for coming. So, I'll just sort of talk about the general findings, and then I'm going to talk more specifically. But the results of this study were really, really positive, and the downtowns that we studied are all moving in a really positive direction. And this just hasn't just happened all of a sudden, this downtown renaissance. The thing we found is that many cities for decades have been at this downtown revitalization. And it's really now that we're starting to see the benefits of that and the evidence of that. For decades, a lot of downtowns have been building innovative partnerships, taking risks, adopting really progressive approaches to revitalizing and redeveloping their downtown, investing in key infrastructure, and the private sector too, investing in condominiums and residential development when everyone told them no one is going to live downtown. So you've really seen these things take place over a lot of years, and in some cases for decades. But it's now that this is really starting to come together, and downtowns across Canada are really starting to thrive, and it's a really positive time for all the cities that we studied. So as Glenn mentioned, we've broken this down into principles. So the first principle, and the thing we wanted to understand about all our downtown case studies, is the role that the downtown plays as part of the wider city. And one thing we found was that these downtown neighbourhoods are really small often. They comprise a mere 1% of the city land area. But these are really important neighbourhoods. They're often generating 10 or 20 times that in terms of property tax revenues. They've got half a city's office inventory at least. They're a growing residential neighbourhood. So these are really important areas and a key and crucial part of having a strong city. So these are some of one of the things we identified is that for a municipality like HRM that's 200 distinct communities and 23 former municipalities, the downtown having a voice in such a large urban context can be a challenge. So this again just shows the importance of having a strong downtown helps contribute to a strong municipality. And in HRM they're really starting to refocus and get a stronger voice in the downtown, which has been great.
HRM is Halifax.
Oh, sorry, this is Halifax Regional Municipality. Okay, so on that principle as well, downtowns are also really iconic and powerful symbols of the city. It's often how people recognize and understand the city. It's almost the city brand in a lot of ways. You can see the postcards, it's what people visualize when they think about their own cities. So, we feel this is also another really valuable role that downtowns play. And also, just in terms of Mary's introduction, she sort of alluded to this evolution that downtowns have been through as the historic sort of centre of cities. And then they sort of went through a period of decline, and now they're sort of resurging. So this just really shows, how resilient downtowns have been and how important they've played. And while we studied downtowns of a lot of different sizes, functions, and scales, they'd all been through this relatively similar trajectory, and they're all sort of moving in a positive direction now. So this is, just to sort of emphasize, this isn't about creating a downtown suburban divide. This project is not about that at all. It's really highlighting that the downtown is an integral piece of the city's economy. And in Toronto, the city occupies just 3% of the city's land area, but it's generating a quarter of the city's property tax revenue. It's got the country's largest stock exchange. I mean, economically, this is a really important piece of the city, so keeping it strong and vital is critical not just to the city of Toronto, but the entire GTA and even the nation. It has a really strong concentration of historic and distinctive architecture, cultural and educational assets, retailing, all manner of amenities. It's the centre of the region's transit system. So these things are really important, and all of the downtowns that we studied had that similar and central role in cities. Okay, so the second principle we looked at was visionary, and that was, does the downtown have strong leaders that collaborate to achieve a shared vision? And the thing we found was that a clear vision went a really long way. And that wasn't just, a really rigid, fixed vision. It was a flexible vision that could sort of be adapted and propel the downtown forward into the future. Like when I was talking with people at Vancouver as part of my research, a lot of them said, we want to build a city for people. And that's a really powerful idea in itself, but it also creates a really strong framework for decision making and prioritizing and making choices. So as those cities that really had a clear vision that sort of clearly laid out where they needed to move, that was really flexible and able to sort of adapt throughout the decades, that had seen a lot of transformation. And also cities that had developed master plans, and increasingly downtowns have been the subject of downtown-specific master plans, but it was the cities that had kept implementing them and, reported on their progress of how well they'd been implementing them, that had seen, the most momentum behind their revitalization efforts.
Just to make a point on that, in the importance of tracking and monitoring in Ottawa, one of the things they did 6 or 7 years ago was introduce a subsidy to encourage more residential development. Because they were keeping track, they were able to say, we're reaching a point, we've reached a tipping point, and so we think that we can back off that subsidy. So there's some practical benefits for that.
Mm-hmm. I'll talk a lot more about tracking later. This is something I'm very passionate about. Okay, so again, a lot of what I'll be talking about today is how investing in the downtown really pays off. And so you can invest in your downtown in a lot of different ways. And one of the ways you can invest in it is undertaking planning processes. And Halifax Regional Municipality has undertaken a really successful recent planning process called HRM by Design. And one thing that was happening in downtown Halifax, there was a real challenge because there was heritage conservation on one hand and development on the other, and they were really being seen as mutually exclusive things. But this whole process really broadened the dialogue around development and really created the concept that we can create new buildings, we can create new development and still conserve our heritage at the same time. And so that positive dialogues allowed the development of design guidelines, the development of the strategic urban partnership to identify new sites in the downtown to be redeveloped, and to really see regeneration of their heritage buildings. And so in the past 3 years, there's been more development there than in the past few decades. So it just goes to show that investing in a planning process really, really can pay off and give you economic returns for your city.
Yeah, and I think it's a good example of the importance of building trust. The decisions to invest, whether it's from the public side or the private side, you've got to have belief in the process. So the partnership that Katherine just described is a really good example of actually recovering the trust, because that had been lost and it was recovered, and they've been able to move forward.
Right, so downtown Toronto doesn't actually have a specific downtown master plan. It was one of the few cities that didn't. But I think in this case it was actually seen as a positive thing, because it's really allowed in this city for the emergence of a lot of local champions, a lot of neighbourhood level planning, and the emergence of really diverse neighbourhoods. So I mean, it's not about necessarily creating master plans for every downtown, but looking at what your city needs and creating planning processes that can really help contribute to the city that everyone wants to live in. And, these planning processes also provide the opportunity to create really strong partnerships. And in downtown Toronto, there's, hundreds of people and organisations that are really contributing to city building in the downtown. And, these planning processes can help align all these different groups and bring these people together. So the third principle we looked at was prosperity, and that's we looked at the economic strength of downtowns. So part of what we looked at there was how they're going in terms of office space, and they've generally been retaining at least half of their city's office inventory. I mean, as you're all aware, there's been a lot of challenges with building offices downtown. There's so many greenfield sites available that are less constrained, but the downtowns have been doing quite well, particularly in recent years. Almost all of the downtown case studies have seen at least one significant office building being built in their core, which has been a really positive sign. And the downtowns also have a strong concentration of jobs. They have a lot of employment opportunities. Halifax, Victoria, London, they all have really high densities of jobs, which creates a really vital downtown, particularly during office hours, and really helps, increase the strength and vitality of the downtown core.
Yeah, I was just going to add, as you may know, the COI has done quite a lot of work with Ian Dobson, who's in the back of the room, looking at the office market in the Greater Toronto Area. You're looking at more than 200 million square feet. So these metrics are really focused on the comparison with from downtown to the municipality itself. And we know that in the suburbs, in the 905, 65 million square feet have been built in the last few decades, and that's the equivalent or more than the office space that exists in Calgary and Edmonton combined.
Mm-hmm. And I just want to draw attention to this graph. You'll see that London's done really well at retaining about 80% of its office space downtown. And this hasn't been an accident. They've actually had policies in their official plan that have directed all major office space to the downtown core. So these are the sorts of things that, the sorts of policies that cities might be able to consider to really, avoid that decentralization of commercial space and think about how, this activity can be more concentrated.
Should we just mention the Saskatoon example? Where the people in Saskatoon have a similar concentration, and they're looking to this study as to hold up to say, well, look what Edmonton did, what London did. Let's not lose that message.
Oh yeah, that was Regina.
Oh, Regina, right. Southwest.
Okay, I know my downtowns.
That's why she looked at me when I said Saskatoon.
Okay, so the downtowns have also been attracting really positive residential growth. I mean, you just need to walk out the door to see that here. And the downtowns that have been at these revitalization efforts for the longest have sort of seen the most results in the data we've collected. I mean, Edmonton's been working really hard for a couple of decades at their downtown revitalization processes, and they're really starting to see now, enormous amounts of residential growth in percentage terms. And they explained it to me as saying that they almost have a formula for residential growth, that they strategically target neighbourhoods around the city where they want to attract residents, and then they start investing in the public realm. They start upgrading streetscapes, planting trees, adding pocket parks, or whatever the case may be, to make it a really attractive place to live. And they've found that private investment has followed that. So cities have done this in different ways, but I mean, all of the downtowns that we studied have been really proactive in trying to attract residential growth, and it's really been paying off for all of the cities that have been experiencing a lot of new residential development. So downtown Toronto has also been attracting really high portions of new development. I mean, the importance of attracting new development to your downtown is particularly important given how many municipalities are almost developed now. I mean, in terms of, there often isn't the greenfield land available anymore to be able to build new residential land. So it makes intensifying the downtown an even bigger priority and more important. So downtown's been attracting on average, about 20% of construction value in the city of Toronto over the past decade. And that's spiked and, sometimes been higher and lower. But this is really important and really shows how these intensification aims are paying off. And you can see in this map, it's not a fantastic graphic, I'm afraid, but just where that development's happening. As Glenn mentioned, the deregulation of the Kings and redevelopment of the waterfronts led to lots of new development in the southwestern portion of the city, and development's also been happening along the subway lines. So post-secondary institutions have been really transformational city builders in essentially every city that we studied. I mean, looking at this room, this building, it represents an amazing and visionary partnership between Ryerson and the private sector and public sector. I mean, there was numerous players involved in developing this kind of facility. I mean, across the whole country, there's evidence of these really innovative partnerships happening and these universities moving into the downtown core. And this has a really positive kind of double benefit because not only are you creating a new facility, a new piece of infrastructure for the downtown, but you're attracting students to the core that really vitalize the downtown throughout the day, outside business hours, support local businesses and that kind of thing. And you're also potentially creating a whole generation of students that, will one day provide a skilled labour force for the city and will create bonds to the downtown and, really care about the downtown into the future. So this is a great synergy and hopefully one that will continue into the future. So the downtowns all made a really significant contribution to the city's bottom line. And they've made this in many ways, but particularly in terms of property tax revenue. So, I mean, in a lot of instances, in Toronto, it's sort of generating a quarter of the property tax revenue. The number's similar in Victoria, although that municipality is quite a lot smaller. In Vancouver, it's also very significant. But this number can be, really reflect to the level of intensification that's been happening in downtowns. For example, just 5 years ago, downtown Edmonton was only generating 5% of the city's property tax revenue, and now it's generating 10%. So you can really see how you can build up the city's tax base in the downtown core and how those efforts really pay dividends in terms of returning that investment into the future. So this graph below too is just how downtown Toronto's property tax revenue is generated. So you can see in blue, it's very hard to read, I'm sure, but the blue line is citywide property tax revenue, excluding the downtown wards, and the red bar is the downtown property tax revenue. So you can see the downtown's generating almost half the city's commercial property tax revenue, more than triple the city's office revenue. It's the biggest generator of office revenue, and significant amounts of multi-residential and residential revenue. So this is just really important to keep in mind. And again, important to ensure the downtown can keep providing office space because that's where a lot of the revenue is coming from. And then there's livability. So this was our fourth principle. So we wanted to look at, how livable is the downtown. And I mean, this is sort of one of those circular things. So the more people that live in a downtown, the more livable it becomes. And a lot of cities we spoke with were struggling at getting to that tipping point of becoming more livable. But some of them had worked really, really hard to get to that point, and they'd started to see that really significant surge in population, which was exciting for them. Excuse me. And these downtowns... Sorry, I'm talking too long. These downtowns tended to have younger and better educated populations, which is, again, a function of the fact they were doing so well in terms of attracting post-secondary institutions. But one thing almost all the downtowns were struggling with was providing housing diversity and diverse housing options. I mean, for example, City Place, I think Councillor Adam Vaughan undertook a study where he surveyed 5,000 apartments and there's only 128 children. So these are things we really need to consider when we're thinking about livable downtowns. And I was looking at a photo yesterday of the St. Lawrence neighbourhood and from the 70s, and, it was totally, almost entirely a parking lot. And I think we forget the level of effort and the planning and the engagement that went into building that neighbourhood and just how successful it is now. And I think we need to remember that, these things have taken a lot of time and a lot of work, and we just should keep that in mind as we keep building new communities.
We just one of the pictures on this slide is the grocery store, and one of the things that we've sort of picked out is that if you have an urban grocery store locate, it's sort of an indicator that that they're there to meet the marketplace, and we're actually benefiting from that because we have a new development across the street from our office, and it's extraordinary. I didn't know there were so many people out and about at lunchtime. When you go to the new Loblaws, it's the place to go to buy not just groceries, but to have your lunch. One of the radio interviews we did in Saskatoon, I got the right city this time. One of the 3 different callers were complaining, what we need is an urban grocery store downtown. So I mean, it's a chicken and egg thing, but it's a good indicator that something right is happening in terms of attracting residential development.
Yeah, this is part of what I was talking about, that tipping point. Once the downtown has a supermarket, that's really significant. But there's things other cities have done to sort of bypass that. Like the City of London created Covent Garden Market, which is allowing a place to buy produce and fresh food in the city until the time comes where there'll be enough people there to support a supermarket. And we collected lots of different data as part of this assignment, but one thing that we did collect was land use information. And I've just sort of looked at this not only to show how mixed-use downtowns are. They're really diverse neighbourhoods. But this information also helps us understand the development potential in a downtown. This map of Winnipeg, you'll notice that almost a third of the land is either transportation, which almost means surface parking lot. Most of the time there is some railway stations. And the grey land is vacant land. So this really allows you to see how much development potential there is in our downtowns and how this will be really important to intensify. And also opportunities to think about things like integrated community energy systems or that sort of thing. The downtown really lends itself to those sorts of opportunities. So I think they're really important as we're revitalising and redeveloping our downtowns. And the downtowns also have much higher rates of walkability. So these pie charts, it's probably hard again to read, but the yellow is not with the car, the blue's with the car. One side's downtown, the other side's citywide. So you can see that downtown, there's almost an inversion. So people in the downtown are walking to work and cycling and catching transit to work at a significantly higher rate than people living in the remainder of the city. So this is sort of another reason to promote downtowns because they really lend themselves to promoting walkability and alternative modes of transportation, which is a real advantage for the city in addressing issues associated with congestion and increasing growth. And we also looked at the block size as sort of an indicator of walkability. And interestingly, Halifax does have the most compact grid and the highest rates of downtown residents walking to work. But, this is just really something to consider. You can subdivide your blocks to make them more interesting for walking and to create more opportunities as you're walking around the city and enjoying that experience. Okay, so as we sort of discussed, Toronto's becoming much more livable. There's been a return of national retailers. Downtown Toronto's providing a lot of examples about how national large-scale retailers can come downtown and create interesting and urbanly, like sensitive stores that are sensitive to the urban context and adapt to the downtown conditions. There's all manner of community facilities, arts and educational facilities, waterfront revitalization. So the downtown is just becoming a much more livable place. And again, as more people move in, there's more and more amenities, and it becomes more comprehensively livable. Okay, so the fifth principle we looked at, and this is probably the most important for the purposes of this project in terms of the information that we were really wanting to collect, and that's strategy. So is the city strategically investing in its future? And the one thing we looked at here is that, or the one thing we found was that there's been a lot of investments in Canadian downtowns, a lot of public investments in Canadian downtowns, which has been really, really great to see. And these have been coming from all levels of government. And what we found is that these large-scale investments have been really good at growing the profile of downtowns, growing confidence in the downtowns. They sort of, create a symbol that the public sector is willing to invest in the downtowns and send this message to the development community. But what we found was that it's the smaller-scale investments that really, really add up to be transformational and really complement these large-scale investments. So a city that's sort of done this in a really interesting way is London. So the city's been really progressively, really proactively investing in the downtown, making a range of strategic investments. But they've coupled these with heritage incentives, residential incentives, facade upgrade improvements, all these small scale incentives that have been leveraged by the private sector. And they've also tracked their data really well. So you can see how, these points are all, on this map, these points are all large-scale investments. The size of the dot sort of corresponds to the size of the investment. And you can actually see how much the investments have been leveraged and utilised, or how much the incentives have been more highly utilised around these large-scale investments. And they've spread them across the city so you can create the most benefit from these new investments and these new revitalisation projects. So a lot of downtown London now, has made use of these incentives and really utilised them. And this is the importance, I've got this slide in here, is the importance of collecting data on downtowns. Because I've mentioned Edmonton a couple of times today, but they thought they were investing really strongly in their downtown, and, they have obviously been seeing great results. But when you actually collect their capital project information, you start to see, what this maps is both in the blue line, it's the percentage of the city's capital budget that's being invested in the downtown, and the red line is the amount. So while the amount and the percentage of investments in the downtown was increasing for some time, over the past 5 years or so, that number's really dropped off. And this was a real surprise to people at the city, and understandably. And so collecting this data really gives you a sense of what's going on. It really helps empower you and understand and get a better grip of what investments are happening in your city, and how you can sort of adjust that profile and make sure that you're continually reinvesting in your city. And this graph also shows the amount of municipal investment that's happening in the downtowns. So you can see it's really quite varied in terms of, the level of investment. London, Vancouver, Edmonton have all been sort of strongly investing. Halifax and Fredericton have been investing at a lower rate, but a lot of these investments have been happening really recently, which again shows some of this awareness about downtown, or some of this focus on downtown revitalization is quite new. So it's going to be really good to sort of track this into the future to see how this progresses.
I think one of the points to make there is because municipalities and cities are growing, it's a natural thing that you have to support the growth as the city broadens its girth, if you like. And so if you're not keeping track, you can actually lose the momentum for the amount of investment the downtown really needs to keep going.
Great. So this was an investment of, this was a map of the public investments that have been taking place in downtown Toronto. You can see there's been a big focus around Union Station, Nathan Phillips Square, And again, it really highlights the critical role that the post-secondary sector is playing in building the downtown, as well as arts and cultural facilities. So one thing that I just really want to take the time to emphasize is that investing in the downtown, really pays off. And there's all kinds of ways to do that. So one really fantastic idea that emerged in Saskatoon was a collaboration that's been going on since the 1980s between the city and their bid, where quite simply all the parking revenue, all the parking meter revenue collected by the city is tagged for streetscape improvement projects in the downtown. And as a result, they've been able to sort of do fantastic streetscape upgrades in all of their main thoroughfares, and it's been a really positive thing. And it would not be a sort of difficult model to adapt to many other cities. And we also looked at, as I said, these small-scale incentives can also be really, really valuable to a city and its bottom line. So in Victoria, there's a lot of heritage buildings, and they've got quite a significant incentives program. But this graph just shows how investing in these incentives can increase the assessment on these buildings like fourfold. So these investments are really paying themselves off, and you're getting a much more attractive streetscape that in turn is sort of creating this vibrancy in the downtown and helping propel revitalization efforts forward. And as Glenn mentioned earlier, the City of Ottawa has been really successful in attracting residential development by waiving its development charges. And also coupling that with, creating certainty in the process, ensuring downtown development applications have priority, identifying sites that are, opportune for residential development. I mean, it's been relatively comprehensive, but one of the main things they did was waive development charges, and they've seen really significant residential growth across their downtown. And again, the amount that they waived in development charges was paid back through increased taxes in just 4 years. And, they've turned surface parking lots into really great, vital buildings for years to come. So it's just sort of, again, emphasizing, that creating these investments can actually provide really good economic returns. And I'll just talk quickly about collecting and visualizing data, because with the exception of London and really recently Saskatoon, there wasn't a lot of downtown data collected. A lot of the cities that we studied didn't even really know what their downtown population was until we did this study. So to have an understanding of what your downtown is doing, I think, is really important to sort of build momentum behind revitalization efforts. So I've just taken some slides from my hometown, Melbourne, Australia, to show how we've been doing it there for quite a few decades. And this is just one slide that shows the curbside cafes. And that picture to the left was the first cafe in downtown Melbourne. It's actually owned by the City of Melbourne. And they leased it out at below market rates on the condition that they were open really late at night. So there was one place to come after business hours. Melbourne was known as the donut city, and it had, a lot of commerce, but everyone cleared out later on. So this was sort of the first attempt to do that in the 80s. This data was collected again in 1993. And then again in 2004. And I mean, now everyone in Melbourne thinks this has always been the case, and it's always been the cafe culture, and you've never met bigger coffee snobs in your whole life. But it's not. It's actually a really new phenomenon. And, it just goes to show the way that collecting this data and building this momentum and setting a vision can really pay off.
Helps you tell the story.
Yeah, exactly. This is with bluestone paving. And again, it's just like improving streetscapes and, how that can really improve the quality of the public realm. And this is in terms of dwellings. These dwellings, I guess, there's a really nice park right near here, so they were sort of clustered around that. That's known as our Paris End. So there was always some people living there, but this was in 1983. By 1997, it had spread a little more. And then by 2002, you've almost got people living all through the downtown core. And you'll see that they've tracked convenience stores too. So this is just showing, again, the city becoming more livable and more vibrant and a better place to live, work, and invest. So that was our presentation. Did you have anything to add?
No, I think we'll just invite Mary up to. We'll just have some questions if you've got any. And
I guess when I'm listening to all of this and about the tracking, I'm remembering a comment that Pauline made. She said, the wonder is that it hasn't happened before. Why hasn't it? Why? Oh, sorry. Why would you say this is the first time, Katherine?
Well, I think people have been collecting data for a lot of things, but maybe not looking at the downtown-specific geography, because it's not usually any political boundary. I wonder, too, if people just sort of think that take the downtown for granted a little bit and think that it will be okay and be really resilient. I think that could also be, part of it, that it's just seen as a place that will be able to persist.
And Glenn, you were there was something you said that I just wanted you to expand on. This was fascinating. If you think about downtowns as the heart, and the revitalization of the heart, and you talked about how cities have to be careful that in the broadening of the girth, they don't lose the investment on the heart. It brings back to life that idea of a city as a form of a human organism.
Organic. I mean, we know from our studies that cities are organic, and when this conversation about doing the study really started in Halifax, and at the time, this is about 4 years ago, the feeling was with the downtown organization there was that they were losing ground relative to the spending that was taking place in the suburban municipalities. And if you recall the slide, Halifax was the subject of an amalgamation, so it's an incredibly large municipality, and so a lot of demands on public tax dollars. So the momentum to do the study actually came from being able to muster an argument to be able to say there's value in downtown, which is how we got there.
And are there? Let me take some questions from the. Yes, please, and maybe just say where you're from and.
That's a really good question, but it's also a really hard one to give you a definitive answer. I don't think there is an ideal mix. I think what you want to do is create the conditions that the office market will be able to pursue its needs and also residential. One of the things that we've noticed in downtown Toronto, and we noticed this in our the new geography of office location study as well, is the good news is that Toronto has a very mixed use downtown. But the other news is that we've lost a very large number of sites that might have been office buildings. And if you look at the dynamics of how you actually develop an office building versus a residential, there's a lot of evidence to show that it's a lot easier to reach the economic tipping point with residential, and it can outbid the office. So when you introduce the idea of residential, you have to perhaps have an eye on making to the degree you can, protect the ability of certain office sites, actually designate some office sites perhaps, so to ensure that they remain available when the market is there.
I might just add one thing. The city of Vancouver was having this exact problem in their downtown, and as a result, they've sort of created policy to actually protect sites for office use. So they essentially said that there wasn't going to be any residential development allowed on these spaces. So, you really have to, it's been an issue in some of the cities that we've studied. You really have to be conscious of that and understand how important it is that there is commercial development in the downtown.
Any other? Yes, way in the back. Also identify yourself, please.
In the core of downtown, based on the growth plan, for example, RealNet's just done a study where they've indicating that Places to Grow has been instrumental in that surge of residential development in the downtown.
So sorry, what was there a question?
Yes, there is.
Sorry.
The question is, based on Katherine's observations, looking at Halifax, looking at Vancouver, looking at Melbourne, Australia, what role does that play? Containment of urban boundary.
Thanks a lot, Katherine. Well, Toronto is probably not like a number of other cities because it is such a large region, and there are sort of dynamics between what is now the City of Toronto and the surrounding region with different tax policies in place. But I think you can't deny that if you have a containment policy, it's going to have an effect on the downtown markets. But I don't think it's something that you can be prescriptive. A lot of the downtown centres in the Greater Toronto area, they're attracting some residential development, but they're not attracting office development. So the idea of having that mixed-use development in those centres isn't being achieved, and I think it's worth looking at why that is.
Yes, in the back. Thank you, Carissa.
Good morning. Glenn Norton, Manager of Urban Renewal for the City of Hamilton. Hello, Councillor. So my question is, based as a city who's looking to be participating in round 2 of your study here, was one of the specific deliverables of the study not only identifying what things are working, what things do attract, and why development happens downtown? So you've mentioned development charges, waiving incentives, and so on, which we have. But did you also identify those policies, strategies, and so on, which are working against it? So along similar lines as the previous questions about urban boundary, development charges in the suburbs, transportation master plans, is that a specific deliverable we could expect from your study?
I think it is. We've been talking a lot about Edmonton today, but Edmonton is a good example of where, as we know, the West Edmonton Mall was just a sort of a great, very large symbol of how you can suck the life out of a downtown. It wasn't the only thing that was going on. There were many other factors, but it was a sort of a cautionary tale for the government in Edmonton, and when they realized what the impact was on their fiscal situation, they started to take some steps to reverse that. So one of the things that we didn't have time to talk about is that each case study has a timeline. And it's another one of my favorite pieces of the study. So, some of these downtowns were, is where the city started back in 18 whatever. And so we looked at all of the things. We tried to identify significant turning points. So in the case of the City of Toronto, an obvious one might be the height bylaw in 1974. Another one might be St. Lawrence or Eaton Centre amalgamation, things like that, things that actually had an impact on the overall scheme of things. So to answer your question, I think the answer is yes. This isn't just about cheerleading. It's actually about trying to understand the dynamics and the complexities, quite honestly, of downtowns and the conditions, so some good ideas that can be transferred from one city to another. And as we have 10 cities now, and we've just finished 2 more, and we're hoping to do more, as you say, including Hamilton. And so what we expect is that over time we'll have an incredible base, a GIS base, a knowledge base to build on, that people can start higher up the curve when they want to come back to it and renew the study.
I might just add something too. We've really tried hard to sort of create a balanced report on all of these downtowns and identify some of the challenges. And sort of, I've talked more generally about the findings as part of this presentation, but locally, some of these case studies had really quite a significant impact. For example, in Halifax, this study really drew attention to the decentralization of office space in the city and that sort of thing. So that this study has really been able to draw attention to local issues in each of the cities and, get the conversation happening around these downtown issues and how the downtown can be strengthened into the future.
Any other questions? And can I also say, yes, I'll come to you here at the first table and then you. Also, please, I think, Carissa, there's still coffee and pastries in the back. Yeah, so just get up and help yourselves, because from these questions we'll go straight to the panel discussions in another 10 minutes or so. Yes, sorry, at the first table here. No, Carissa, let's begin here. Yeah, great.
I'm Andrew Frankham with the International Office at CUI. I'm just, I have 2 questions. I'm curious to know what to expect, a little bit more of what to expect in the next phase of the study, what cities might be coming online, etc., other downtowns, if you can say. And secondly, I'm curious to know how this study has increased the conversation between downtowns. What effect has it had in stimulating conversation and learning and experience sharing between different Canadian downtowns?
Do you want to try the first bit?
Okay. So, am I allowed to say? We've done case studies now for Regina and St. Catharines. I think we have some St. Catharines people here. Are they here? Oh, hey. So yeah, that's been really successful, and we've got a lot of cities sort of in the wings that have come forward since we've launched this study that have seen the value in this kind of assignment. Windsor's looking really close. Hopefully Hamilton, Kingston, St. John's. So maybe Guelph. I don't know. We haven't actually finalised this yet, but we're looking for new cities to join the study, and it's been seen generally as a really valuable piece for city builders. And in terms of one of the really great things that's come out of this project is the network that's been built. So the network was sort of existing through the Canadian Issues Task Force of the International Downtowns Association. But through this project, it's really, really been strengthened, and new cities have come on board. And there's also been partnerships here between the municipalities and the business improvement associations through this project. So one of the really valuable outcomes that I can see out of this is the creation of this really strong network where people are able to exchange knowledge, exchange ideas, talk to each other about what people are doing in their own cities and how that can be implemented and rolled out in their own cities. So I see that as one of the key, successes of this study.
And may I just add that one of our ambitions is that as this body of knowledge grows, as this body of knowledge grows, this will be readily available through the miracle of the internet, and that this comes as a source for people to come and get, for students across the country, for other businesses, for other cities, and to participate in this, and actually consider themselves as a group with a voice, and be able to follow through on their passion for downtowns.
And yes, Carissa, you've got the mic. Good, yeah.
Beata Bauern from Toronto. My question is related to Andrew's. I was struck by the fact that Montreal wasn't there.
Thank you, Beata. There's a simple explanation. The first 10 cities that we did are the ones that were able to sign on when the starter's flag was raised. It was complicated by the fact that Montreal had just done an extensive study of its downtown, and they felt that, well, they want to see. So we expect that to be in subsequent versions of this. Obviously, the members of the International Downtown, or Canadian members of the International Downtown Association, are, there's a list of those, and so we're going through those. But we're talking to other cities as well. So we would hope to include Calgary and cities like that, and definitely Montreal. You couldn't really have a representative discussion of Canadian downtowns without the centre-ville. Right?
And I'll take you in. Let me just check with Carissa. Carissa, do you have someone back there who wanted to speak? No? Then we'll take a question here at this table.
Sure. Fred Eisenberg, I'm with the Urban Institute, President and CEO, and I as a former mayor of an amalgamated city, I know that one of the dilemmas that we always face is that suburbanites believe that too much money is actually invested in it. So just to kind of highlight again what this study might actually highlight in terms of the economic value of investing in the downtown core and the benefits, economic benefits that would help offset some of the suburban concerns that might be out there.
Maybe just repeat the question.
Yeah.
Okay, so the question in summary was, that there may be some, I guess, concern about the level of investment happening downtown from people that are living in suburban areas, and they think that the downtown may be getting more than its fair share. Is that a...
Yeah.
Okay. So, I mean, in my view, that's maybe a little bit of an overplayed concern. Like that graph that I showed previously with Edmonton, you can see that even when the downtown was getting really high levels of investment, we're looking at 6% of the capital budget, and it's more around 1%. I mean, most of the downtowns we looked at was even less than 1% of the capital budget. So, the level of investment is often quite a bit lower than people may think. And then the other side of that is that these are like pretty good investments to make from everything that we've been seeing. They're really paying themselves off. They're really increasing the city's tax base. They're providing really good returns in terms of property tax revenue. They're vitalizing and providing bases to support local businesses. They're attracting new residents. So, I mean, it's an important thing to consider, but I didn't sort of see that as a really big issue.
I think we have time for one more question. Sorry. Let me take it here. No, Carissa, sorry. I promised here. Carissa, second table. I'm sorry, Chris. I'll try to get to you as well.
I'll try to be brief. Ian Panabaker, City of Guelph. And just to try and tie some threads together, we're one of the outer cities of the growth plan, so in an area that was not de facto intensifying. It was a greenfield-based economy. And the value of this for us is immense because we're updating our official plans to reflect the growth plan, of course, but the real political issue is the them versus us discussion in these outer municipalities. And to be able to state the economic development importance of and the real traction that downtowns and existing places have in contributing to the local economies is essential. That's how we've got the political gain that we have in Guelph and other places, to be able to state the facts in an economic development sense to the politicians. And that's the value that's coming out of this. Thanks.
That's fantastic. Carissa, do you mind bringing the mic over to Chris now? Take the mic. Yeah, thank you.
Initially, I was going to ask what has been the federal and provincial response to the results of your study. But then at the same time, thinking of this suburban-urban rivalry, do you think that downtowns deserve a greater share of the investment because of the spillover that has on the suburbs? Having lived in the Midwest of the United States, no one thinks of Oakland County. They think of Detroit, and your perception of Detroit is Detroit, not the wealthy suburbs. Same thing in Wisconsin. Same thing in Illinois. It's just that Chicago is wonderfully aggressive as a downtown. And so do you think downtowns, by having a vibrant downtown, that is good for the suburbs? And do provinces recognize that? Do federal governments recognize that?
Yeah, taking City Hall to Ottawa, in effect, right? That's, by the way, Chris D'Souza, the new head of planning at Ryerson. Is it recognized by national federal governments?
I'll add something.
Okay, I think the short answer is no. And one of the reasons that this study was released in Ottawa was because we had an opportunity to make a presentation after the release to a group of MPs that was convened by the Deputy Speaker. And it was interesting to learn that a number of the MPs were former municipal councillors, so they understand the issues. And so what we hope is that there would be sort of a growing coalition and a value in a collective voice.
Go ahead.
Okay. And I mean, we did find a lot of really promising signs that the province and that there were federal and provincial contributions to really important projects downtown. But then we also found that there was a lot of things that undermined that from the same level of government. For example, in Ottawa, they're building an LRT system, but at the same time they're talking about moving thousands of federal government jobs to the old Nortel campus. So, there's some points where perhaps there could be a lot more coordination between these levels of government, and, the benefits could be greater for the entire city.
Okay, thank you. I think what I'll do now is invite the panelists to come up to the front. Kristen Wong-Tam has just arrived, so thank you, Kristen. We'll plunge you straight into the deep end. Carissa will get your slides loaded. And yes, maybe grab a coffee refill now while you have a chance.